listening to a Posani Independent Media Productions exclusive. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to 25 Degrees with Alex Posani. We are here. It is Wednesday, May 20th, and I have a very special guest in an audio-only episode today. It is player agent George Bazos. George, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. We appreciate you popping on, and I don't know, how often do you ever get unsolicited emails to show up on a podcast with 20 subscribers?
You know what? I do get emails quite a bit. Somehow this one got to the top of my email mailbox, and hey, it's a slow day, so I figured I'd give it a shot.
Maybe it was meant to be. It's we're on the way up, so you hopping on and doing this, it means a lot to me. So, George Bazos, you are the El Jefe over at Edge Sports Management. So, tell us a little bit about what Edge does.
Well, we represent professional hockey players. We help kids through the junior ranks, through college, and then the ones that are lucky enough to turn pro, we become their agents and handle everything from the negotiations, tax work, help them with their investments, endorsements, really anything they need, help them get mortgages, help them buy cars. You'd be surprised. These kids, they are kids. As much as you see them on TV and you're like, wow, they're stars. They haven't had a lot of real life experience, and that's really what we're, one of the main jobs that we do for them.
It's one of those things, and I've always, I've worked in junior hockey since 2017. We're coming up on a full decade, and I remember how I was at 18, and I remember. If I wasn't a great athlete as a kid, if you gave me all the talent and suddenly a lot of money in a big spotlight, I could just imagine how insufferable I would have been. And I was lucky, that I was able to carve out a spot for myself. But still, being a young kid, there were times where I had to learn the hard way. It's better to shut up and sit there and listen and learn than to, run your mouth and just try and impress everybody in the room. I'd imagine, are there a lot of tough conversations that you have to have that, especially with some of the younger players?
The hockey players, they're pretty grounded, and they want help. They know, they know what they know and they know what they don't know. So as far as the hockey side of it goes, they've got a pretty good handle on things. As far as the life side, setting up a bank account, paying taxes, budgeting out, because players get paid during the regular season. They don't get checks during the summer. When a player gets his first signing bonus check, you need to have them prepared that if their signing bonus installment is $95,000, they're going to see about $65,000 in their check, and they need to understand why. They can't spend money that they don't have. So, yes, there are times. I remember once a long time ago, I had a player who got a signing bonus, and I forget the amount, but let's say it was $100,000, just use a round figure. And after taxes, he bought a car, maybe had $30,000 left. He told me he was going to buy a dining room table, an expensive dining room table. This thing, again, I don't remember the exact cost, but I think it was around $20,000, which back then was a lot of money. And I was like, what are you getting a dining room table for? You're going to have family holidays at your apartment? No, but I really like the table. I said, well, you're renting this place. When the season's over, you've got to then move this table, which costs you a lot of money. You've got to store it somewhere. I said, it makes 0 sense. So at the end of it, he did not buy the dining room table, but he was prepared. He wanted to buy that dining room table.
It's one of those things that I've I've worked in jobs where I didn't make a whole lot of money. I come from a middle class family. When you suddenly come across some money, you start seeing things that you just kind of tune out because it wasn't realistic. I mean, I remember when I got my first like really decently paying job, I was looking at like men's loafers. I don't even wear loafers, but it's like, oh, I can afford, $600 shoes. I remember I was talking with my grandma about, hey, I'm gonna go buy these Michael Kors loafers, and she said, you're just gonna walk around the same restaurants and the same stores and the same houses in shoes that just cost you a whole lot more. So why are you gonna do it? And I guess sometimes it's hearing that from somebody to make you realize, like, okay, well, we need to just kind of take it slow here and be a little bit. Honestly, I probably should have heard that a little bit more because I did kind of get a little crazy from time to time. But I mean,
So did you buy the loafers?
I didn't buy the loafers, the $600 Michael Kors loafers. I didn't buy, but there were some other things along the path that I probably should have had some better judgment about. But it's one of those things. Like I think I was lucky to have people around me kind of telling me like, hey, get your head straight. Also, there's a little bit of live and learn, and working with these young men who are incredibly blessed with talent, with ability, and with a profession that allows them to make, quite honestly, what's generational wealth. And I mean, is it one of those things like if you got some guy who maybe grew up somewhere where he didn't have that sort of wealth, where you gotta tell him that maybe it isn't the best idea to post Instagram pictures of doing push-ups with stacks of hundreds on your back and stuff.
Again, the hockey players are a little more grounded. Haven't had to go quite to that extent, but the generational wealth in hockey does not come immediately. So unlike some of the other sports in football, basketball, if you're a high draft pick, you get big guaranteed dollars. In hockey, you don't get to generational wealth until some guys now on their second contract, but mostly third contract and down the road. So they got to keep working. No push-ups with cash on their back until their third contract.
I'm sure. I mean, everyone who follows hockey. I mean, you see stuff like that with guys every now and then, and it's kind of like, man, that's that's a pretty unreal sight to see. But no, I mean, it's one of those things. Like, obviously, there's the negotiation side of it, but there's a lot of other stuff. Like you said, it's the setting up a bank account, getting a mortgage. I'm actually very curious about the negotiation side of it because as a baseball fan as well as a hockey fan, you always hear horror stories about arbitration.
Yeah,
And
well, our arbitration is it's a important process because what arbitration, the whole idea of arbitration is it gives the player some rights. Whereas if the team is not playing fair, negotiating fairly, you can file for arbitration, state your case. The team will then state their case, basically saying that the player is the worst player that the league has ever seen, and the judge, so to speak, will pick an award. At least you're going to get treated fairly, and you're going to get treated fairly in the negotiation. Again, the idea of arbitration is to help get a settlement or get a negotiated agreement between us and the team. But there are times where you can't, and then you do file and you go in front of again the judge, so to speak, and it is a nasty process.
so one thing I was kind of curious about when it comes to arbitration, and I've made contacts with people who've played pro baseball and other pro sports, and like you said, it's the team going up there and saying this is why we shouldn't be paying them this amount. Here's all the reasons why. Obviously, business is business, and you got to be able to separate the personal from the business. But do you sometimes have clients, players that they hear these GMs, these leadership figures saying things that, I don't know, is it one of those things where it's are you able to leave it in the room after arbitration, or do those hard feelings sometimes stick around?
The hard feelings definitely can stick around. Teams have softened a little bit because it used to be they would go after a player hard. Now they understand that they don't want to burn bridges with this player. So they have their attorney do it. It's a little softer, and very few cases even go to arbitration anymore because teams don't want to go through the process of belittling a player that's going to play for them, hopefully going to play for them in the future.
So obviously, the whole sporting world has changed. They call this the era of player empowerment, and it's. I think there's benefits to that. I think there's some sort of, there are some. It's a mixed bag at times, but I think that teams, they view players more of than just, hey, we're going to plug this guy in and get some value out of him, and then, they see players as more of an asset when it comes to playing ability, when it comes to marketing and promotion. And this is something that is really picked up in the last 20 years or so. I think hockey was a little bit slow. I mean, I think the whole thing starts, of course, with the NBA. MLB and NFL follow shortly after. Hockey was a little bit slower to the punch, but I guess what would have caused this in hockey more than anything in the other sports, and what would have made it happen a little bit later? Is it maybe the whole sort of like next man up, we're in the trenches, time
Yeah,
to go out there and
I believe it's generally it's the culture. These kids grow up. Hockey's a hard sport to play, and there are very few quote unquote superstars, especially if you grew up in Canada or now the hot pockets of the U.S. There's always a better player down the street. There's a better player that is 3 years older than you. So you weren't a superstar growing up. You had to go work hard, you know, and no one coddled you. It's changed a little bit now, but I do think it's mostly the players. They don't like to talk about themselves. They don't like um, to think they're above the team. It's all about team, which is the greatest part of the sport. It really is, and the greatest part of dealing with these guys. But at the same time, it does make it a little more difficult to market them.
I will say, from when I started in 2017 to where I'm at now, and it's because I don't want to say I'm older, but I'm 28. I'm still very, very young at this, but I see, even in the last 10 years, a big difference. From the guys that were around when I started, it was a lot more, I guess, insular and business-like. Now, some of these players are more willing to, to let loose and have fun. I do a radio show with the Null team I work for, and those guys will get on there and just have fun and talk about golf, talk about restaurants and movies and video games, and it's honestly almost the most fun hour of my week, even with including the games. And I think that guys are, the era of players going out and promoting themselves and talking. I think honestly, Spittin' Chicklets has helped a lot with that. Making the personal side more accessible for the mass public to digest, and maybe that's made it easier for other guys to open up because they see Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette doing that. Do you think that maybe had a part going into it, or is it more
It
just
definitely has. There's a push from the league, from both sides really, to get more marketing because they want to bring in revenue because revenue helps the owners, revenue helps the players. That's the way the collective bargaining agreement is. So there was a push to that, and like anything else, you basically have to keep rocking over the soda machine until you finally get it to tip. And I think that's what's going on now. Hasn't quite tipped, but it's getting there. And yeah, Spitting Chicklets and all those things definitely help. Part of it too is the league has become much younger. So the players now, whereas they would go into a locker room and really, in the past, really have to respect the veterans in the room, and the veterans, they're the ones that were in charge of everything. The younger kids come in these days now, they get bigger roles on the team more quickly, they get paid more quickly, and when that happens, it gives them more power, and they don't. I don't want to say back down to the veterans, but they're not in awe of the veterans. They come in and hey, they feel like this locker room is their locker room as much as it is a 10-year vet.
And that is an interesting thing. I worked with Brad Lukowich in Dallas at one of the rinks I worked at, and he told some really incredible stories about those late '90s Stars teams, and then later on, when he was with the Lightning, and there's a similar thread of the younger guys, the guys who play, maybe fourth line minutes or third pair minutes, kind of having to defer to the bigger name guys. And I wonder about the friction that sometimes happens in a locker room where you hear about one guy doesn't like another guy, and I take all that stuff with a grain of salt in the media. Generally, I believe where there's smoke, there's fire, but I don't know like how much of it's getting blown out of proportion. As an agent, do you ever have to mediate between a client and another teammate? Is that something that you ever get involved in, or is that something that you just say, hey, that's all you. My job is just making sure that everything else is taken care of.
Yeah, I've actually never had that issue. Maybe because our clients are all great guys.
Hey,
Again, in hockey, they are pretty good guys. And I'm sure, with 32 teams and 23, 25 guys in each locker room, not everyone's going to get along and there are going to be some issues. But it's not like the other sports. And if there is some friction, they usually handle it internally.
Yeah, no, that is one thing that I've kind of noticed is that it is different than the other sports. I mean, obviously, you have, people from all over the world coming to play in the top league in the world, and it is people from vastly different cultures. And I think that's one of the fun things about hockey is when you get the Finns and the Swedes and the Russians, and you get to learn a lot about a lot of different cultures and meet people from all over the world. I mean, working in junior hockey, I've gotten to know players from Kazakhstan, from Belarus, from Lithuania. I mean, one of the players that was here in New Hampshire his first year, or our first year here, he just played in the IIHF Men's Worlds Division 1 for Lithuania. So you get to meet people from all over the world, but there's the common thread of, we're here to play this game and to be a part of this game, and we're together. And I think that in a way that it's kind of like it's like a common language that unites rather than lets other things divide. And so I guess that is an interesting point.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you do get players from different countries. Everyone respects each other. The only time it really comes up is during international competitions when your teammate during the season is not your teammate for that 2 weeks. And it's not even friction. It's just they don't talk to each other.
Right.
So it's different. But then when they get back in their regular season locker room, everyone's back together. At least I find that at times you'll see the players from certain countries. Yeah, they may go to dinner together more often, but it's not very cliquey.
Right. Well, it's like in the World Baseball Classic this year, Cal Raleigh and Randy Arozarena getting into it for not shaking each other's hands before an at-bat.
Right.
I mean, those guys had to go to Seattle and play together, but, in that game, they're trying to beat each other. And that's kind of the fun thing, that when you separate it from, hey, these two guys are teammates here, now that they're competitors, the best on best aspect of it makes it a lot of fun. And obviously with the Olympics this year, it's a return to best on best international hockey. Although some people argue you can't call it best on best when Russia isn't involved. That's a whole nother can of worms that I'm not really prepared to get into. But, it is an interesting thing when you see guys who play for the same team now separated onto two separate teams for an international game. And with best on best being back for the first time in 12 years, I think that brought a lot of attention to the NHL, to the hockey world as a whole. And I guess, as an agent, I mean, I would imagine you have to do a lot of stuff with marketing and licensing. How does how is the NHLPA and the NHL as a whole? I know that there are rules regarding the use of Olympic footage and all that stuff. That's been a sticking point that the NHL can't use the Crosby Golden Goal from 2010 to promote their sport, their events. But how do we ride this wave of popularity, especially here in the States after the first gold medal win in 46 years?
Yeah, I think they've done a pretty good job with that already. So the Olympics in the NHL will say it's not an NHL event, so they don't really have a lot of say, believe it or not, in what goes on there. But I do think coming out of the Olympics, you saw a lot of momentum. The TV ratings are through the roof. Obviously, fans packed the buildings. So they've done everything they can as far as that goes. Now you got to get back to the individual player. Hey, what can the players do to keep pushing it forward? And every player is different. I mean, I've had some guys that just superstar players that they just do not want the attention. They don't care how much they're going to get paid to do an ad or whatever it may be. They just don't want to do it.
And is that one of those things where, like, as an agent, as an advocate, you kind of have to say, okay, like, you don't want to do this, that's cool? Or is it one of those things where you kind of have to take them aside and say, hey, look, this might help you going down the road from a negotiation, from a publicity aspect? Where do you toe the line on that?
That's a really good question because we work for the player. And my job is to educate him. Hey, if we do this, these could be the benefits down the road. I'm not saying you have to do it, but here's what could happen down the road. If we don't do this, this is what could happen down the road. And ultimately, the player will make his choice, but he'll be fully educated when he makes that choice.
And I guess at the end of the day, you're there to advise and you're there to advocate. And the thing about, I don't mean to make mentoring sound like, at the highest level of, being a sports agent. When I'm mentoring a young man, I have to tell them, hey, look, I'll never tell you what to do. I'll tell you how I would handle it, and I'll tell you why this is why I'd handle it, and where I'm coming from with this, and with that, you make your decision. And is it one of those things where, when they make their decision, you just kind of have to move on and just look, okay, that's it. He made his decision. I gave him my advice. I did my job here, and we just go on. How do you? Sorry,
we fully support that. So when he makes his decision, we fully support it, whatever it is, and then we do everything we can to make that decision be the best. Get the best result from that decision.
Well, it's certainly an interesting world, especially these days with all the different social media aspects of things. It's a rapidly changing world that I don't always 100% understand. And there's so many new opportunities out there, and it's not just like how it used to be where it's the cover of the Wheaties box, or maybe do you remember the old starting lineup figurines back in the day?
Of course.
I have a whole bunch of those from when I was a kid. So, it's things like, hey, here's a new cryptocurrency. Here's a new, whatever.
That's interesting you bring that up because we get approached a lot. You talk about emails for podcasts. We get emails for, investments or, endorsements for our athletes. And you really have to look at those very closly. Again, we bring them all to the athlete and talk about them all, but we have to do our due diligence and investigative work to make sure that these people are legitimate. Because, like anything else, there are people out there just trying to run a scam, and you need to weed those out.
Yeah, that's you always hear the unfortunate story of the 47-year-old player who got the big payday and he gave all his friends and family, hey, such and such needs a new car, such and such needs their house paid off, and then 45 years old and their house is getting repossessed or foreclosed on. And that's got to be like the worst fear for anyone involved working with athletes is how do we in every way prevent that from happening? And I guess it's just really sound advice is the best strategy, and you go from there, I would imagine.
It is. It's early education. You asked before about the signing bonuses and kids, you buying your loafers. If you start young when they get out of college with their first paycheck, with their first signing bonus check, and really teach them how to budget, set them up with good investment people that'll show them how important it is to invest at a young age and see what that might grow to down the road. It does stop them from spending crazily. You still want them to enjoy themselves, and hey, you know what? You guys have worked hard. You've got a lot of money. Yeah, buy what you want to buy, but within a certain budget, so down the road you're going to be taken care of. Until a player is over the hump, meaning he's in the NHL, he's eligible for waivers. He's not going to go, get sent down or bought out. And you have a pretty good idea of what his income's going to be coming in. You have to be really, really conservative. And once he has a lot of extra money and he's socked away money for the future, hey, if you want to buy a fancy car, go do it. You deserve it.
That's such a it's an amazing thing, because you hear stories about players coming up, just called up, they're just making their NHL debut, they've been playing in the Canadian League or the American League, and they're living on the couch of something like Wyatt Johnston living with Joe Pavelski for a couple of years. I remember working for the Stars, working out of the Frisco office. You'd see the players come and go from their private parking lot in the garage, and you could always tell who the young guys were. I mean, obviously their windows are tinted, it's a dark garage, you can't see who's in there, but you see like a car that's probably about 10 years past his draft eligibility, like, okay, that's one of the new guys. And then as they hang around for a little bit, the cars get a little fancier, they get
I have a great story about a broken down car. So we had a player playing in Pittsburgh at the time, and he was, I think, a second-year NHL player, and we were negotiating a contract coming off his entry-level deal. And the GM at the time, we were going back and forth, and finally the GM just said out of the blue, "I'm going to kick in an extra $20,000 on his signing bonus, just so you can promise me he doesn't drive that beaten up car to the rink every day. He goes and gets himself a new car."
That is incredible. No, that's another thing I want to bring up, because I've always been fascinated by contract clauses and things that teams will add in for added value. Famously, the Rangers giving Rougned Odor, the Texas Rangers, that is, giving Rougned Odor a couple of horses for his horse farm in Venezuela. Does that ever happen at the NHL level? Teams giving players stuff like that to add a little bit of value to get them to sign their name on the dotted line?
Unfortunately, it's not allowed under the collective bargaining agreement. So when I first started in the business 30 some odd years ago, there was a lot more creativity that could go into a contract. It seems almost every collective bargaining agreement since, they've taken the creativity out of it. So really the only bonuses you can get now they're already laid out beforehand. You can get bonuses on your entry-level contract, and you can get bonuses if you're 35 or older. And there's one other if you had an injury, blah, blah, blah. But in general, there's certainly no horses being given away. There are no real bonuses either.
So yeah, I'd imagine that. Do you think are there players in the NHL today that would ask for a horse as a signing bonus? Do you think there's one or two guys there for that?
I'm sure there are. I don't know who they would be, but I'm sure there are.
I remember it was in Alex Rodriguez's contract that he got a suite at every Yankees home game. I think actually the original deal was when he was with the Rangers, he had a suite at the ballpark, and they managed to carry that on when he got traded. But no, I remember, and this is kind of an inside story that from my Rangers friends, that part of his deal was he had a mirror installed outside the Rangers clubhouse in the old ballpark at Arlington. And I can't believe I'm calling that place old now that they're in the new place. But he would stand there in front of that mirror, shirtless, 3 hours before the game, and just practice his swing and just watch himself practice his swing shirtless. That was part of his deal, that mirror had to be right there outside the clubhouse. And that's probably the least surprising Alex Rodriguez story you could probably ever hear, but
it worked.
I mean,
it worked.
Yeah, 600 home runs, 3,000 hits. Have to ask some other questions about that, but hey, at the end of the day, I mean, you can't deny the natural ability. You can question some of the other decisions, some of the judgment, but the natural ability is something that you can't take away. And the numbers, regardless of how he got them, I mean, the numbers are there. And being someone who works with pro athletes, you mentioned that you started in baseball. I would like to hear a little bit about kind of how you make the move from baseball to hockey.
Oh, just kind of fell into it, really. When I left, I worked for the Yankees for a bit. When I left the Yankees, I started to represent baseball players, mostly kids I had played with or against at some point. And that was going pretty well. But back in 1991, I believe it was, John LeClaire graduated from the University of Vermont. And back then in hockey, college hockey was not a major provider of players to the NHL. My firm at the time focused on college hockey, and we had a couple of kids out of the University of Vermont before John that were pretty good players, but then when John came out, he became a star. It took a little time, but he became a star, and he was one of the first of the wave of college hockey players back then. And at that point, we just focused on hockey and stopped representing baseball players, and we were all in on really college hockey players, which was a niche at the time, and now it's grown into obviously a huge part of the NHL.
Yeah, definitely, and it's such a vital pipeline. I mean, you see players who play 4 years of college hockey and then sign an AHL deal, and then they end up being NHL contributors a couple years later. So 1991, this is about to get a little heavy here, but that's not too terribly far after the Allen Eagleson events.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was after that. Yes.
So, did that? I mean, I'm sure that had to have some incredibly profound, lasting impacts on player agents and the players' relationships and how things went forward. I'm sure there were new safeguards, but coming in after that, did you ever hear stories about things like, I guess what you call the wild west days before that, or now things are more buttoned down? How were things evolving then, and how have they evolved now?
Yeah, things are definitely more buttoned down now. The Players Association, when I started, was really starting to ramp up, and they were on top of everything and making sure that everyone was kind of driving the bus in the same direction. It was all about the players, and everyone had to, I guess, put their own egos and everything in the background. And we have all kinds of checks and balances as agents that we get looked at all the time. And if we step outside those boundaries, we could become decertified. There's certain punishments that could happen. I would say in the more recent years, the Players Association has become more of a partners with agents. I mean, way back when there was some friction, but nowadays I think most agents are pretty happy with the Players Association. I know I am, and they're very helpful in anything we ever need. But they make sure that there's no outside the lines, so to speak.
And you speak of the Players Association, the first, from 95 until 2013, you have 3 lockouts, one of which cost an entire season. But you've had, for the last 13 years, a lot of labor stability, which, I'm not going to complain about. I think it's great. I certainly don't miss the lockouts. I will say I got into hockey at the age of 13 in 2011, and the 2012 playoffs on Versus. I still hear the Versus theme in my head at night, late at night when I think about it. And then of course you get into it, and the next year the first half of the year's gone because of a lockout, and you kind of just, it's one of those things that like obviously you got to advocate for the players, and you got to make sure that that the players are taken care of here. Lockouts, for the fans are tough. The past 13 years, though, there's been a level of stability that, for you didn't have previously. So, how is the relationship between the Players Association and the league evolved since that last lockout? Was there a concerted effort of, hey, things had gotten too acrimonious, let's work together to make sure that we got to take care of our side, you got to take care of your side. We need to make sure that we take things together going forward.
I don't know if they actually had that conversation, but certainly the tone. I think part of it is the collective bargaining agreement itself almost lends to both sides being together, because everyone is trying to drive hockey revenue. The players right now get 50% of the revenue. The owners get 50% of the revenue. So they're partners, and you have to work with your partner in any business in order to be successful.
I wish someone would have that conversation in baseball these days. I'm absolutely terrified of losing out on a major league season next year, and it's one of those things where I don't know. I mean, I tend to side with the players on most things, because a lot of these owners, and I'm not one of those guys that wants to sit here and trash owners. They play a valuable role, but they do. It is a business that they do get to hold on to and pass down to their families. These players, they have a limited window to make their money. Careers are not as long on the playing side, and so I tend to be more in favor of whatever gets them a better deal. But one of those things is like, I don't know. Does it kind of ebb and flow to where you'll have relative stability, and then there's going to be an issue that gets people up in arms on both sides, and that raises the temperature? Or is it just one of those things where how do the negotiations take place, and what form do they take, and how do you get from starting things out to getting a CBA ratified?
Yeah, well, I can start by saying I'm definitely on the player side in everything they do.
Definitely.
And if you look back at some of those lockouts, you really got to respect those guys that lost a year or even more, over the course of their careers. They did it to try to help out the future players. We've represented a bunch of those guys, obviously, since I was an agent back then, and it's hard for them. They gave up a good chunk of money, and really their only reward is to see players now getting paid more, which is great. They knew it, they were in for it, and you got to respect those guys. Today, I think how a CBA gets done. Well, I'm not in that room, but I think it's like any other negotiation. So you go to each party. I would imagine, Gary Bettman goes to the owners and finds out what's most important to them. I know the Players Association canvasses the players to find out what's most important to them. And right now, there's a framework that both sides seem to like. So, the last couple of negotiations have been tweaks. They haven't been an overhaul. The second that we went into a salary cap system, that was a major change in the collective bargaining agreement. What you're seeing now are tweaks here and there. So it does make things easier because the framework's there, although a lot of players and people will say that, the framework of having a cap is awful. But when you go to negotiate, you're not negotiating major items as we were back then.
You talk about some of those players who sacrificed a year. It made me think of the proverb, a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit. And I'd imagine that you have some of those guys who are maybe on the back nine of their career. Guys who probably only have a handful of years left, sacrificing a year to make sure that, the young guys of today are going to sit under the shades of that tree. And from an agent side, whenever there's a situation that, a labor stoppage, what's the day to day like for you guys? Like, I'd imagine it's a lot of sleepless nights.
Well, it's the same thing for us. We don't get paid. So
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
personally, it affects us. But again, we're all in this thing together. And yeah, I remember back then we were on the phone a lot with our players. We had looked at other options. Could they play in Europe or start their own barnstorming league, things like that? This was going a while back again. But in general, when the player has time on his hands, you end up talking to them more. During the course of a season, they're scheduled out. I had a situation a couple weeks ago or a month ago where we're helping a guy with his tax returns. And I had to figure out how many days he spent in the state of New York over the 365-day year.
Oh, that's incredible.
The team hadn't withheld in New York for him, but they sent me out their itinerary for both seasons. And until you sit down and really look at an itinerary and how crazy busy these guys are, especially in an Olympic year, it was overwhelming. I was exhausted reading the itinerary, never mind having to live it. So during the season like that, you don't speak to them quite as much because they're running around all over the place. You see them, but it's not the same. In the off seasons, you talk to them more. But during those lockout times, because everyone's in a state of uncertainty, you were talking to them a lot. And everyone's just trying to help everyone stay strong and get through it.
It's incredible, and it's something that I hope, as someone who works in the business, I hope to not ever have to go through a situation like that, because I'd imagine it's tough on, you talk about, the owners and the players, but the day-to-day staff, the production staff, the rink staff, the people who, I'm a PA announcer, it's one of those things where not knowing what my schedule would be not knowing if I'm going to have games in a season, it would be incredibly tough. And so, I'm very glad, from a fan perspective and from a business perspective, that there has been a level of labor peace. And I think that going forward, it seems like to me, I don't know, I think the sky's the limit, quite honestly, on what the NHL and the players could achieve from a publicity and a, helping to grow the league. I think that we might be in the golden age of, you've got players making appearances on, in mainstream stuff. I think the heated rivalry stuff, I don't know how much you want to get into that. I didn't
watch it. My daughters did, but I didn't watch it.
My mom watched it, and I haven't watched it yet. I might watch it during the summer. Who knows? But I think hockey is finding avenues to get recognized by different audiences now. I think stuff like that, like heated rivalry, brings it to an audience that maybe it didn't have as much exposure to hockey before, and I think that's good. Growing the game is good. Growing the game is how you get new fans, how things get better, and how the game stays healthy from a an entertainment and financial standpoint. So I would have to imagine that going forward it's going to keep on getting better. Now, there is something I was very curious about. You have, I'm sure you've seen the John Tortorella news with the Golden Knights. Yes. And shutting out the media. And I heard, there's also been the news with the Bruce Cassidy stuff going on as well. Seems like there's always some sort of a firestorm in Vegas this time of year. I don't know what the deal is with there, but with the Bruce Cassidy stuff, I saw a statement from the NHL Coaches Association, which I've known about the NHLPA. I know about the NHLOA, the Officials Association. I guess this was a blind spot for me. I wasn't aware of the NHL Coaches Association before, and I did some research. It is, an advocacy union. I looked at the staff. It's all coaches, all current and former coaches. I know that I've heard before that coaches will hire agents. Is that one of those things? I know that teams are not allowed to hire agents for the GM search. I think Nashville got in trouble for that recently.
So as agents, as part of our certification, we cannot represent coaches.
Okay.
I forget how many years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, they came out with that rule, and it makes sense.
Right.
If you think about it. So
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about the Coaches Association, but they are not. The coaches are not represented by NHL certified agents. I can tell you that.
I wonder. I would like to learn a little bit more about that. So if you know anybody in that realm, I would like to learn about that. I think that'd be a enlightening experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously, a lot of the coaches are former players. So these players had agents. So they were leaning on their agents their whole career, and now they get into coaching and they still want to lean on their previous agents. But we're just not allowed to formally engage in that.
Well, it's all about protecting the players. I mean, it makes sense, and I don't disagree with it. It's just one of those things. Do the officials have agents, or is that just one of those things where they just negotiate their contract directly with the league?
Again, I'm not involved in that, so I do not
Yeah.
know. My guess is that they have probably a set pay rate based on seniority, but again, I don't know that for sure.
Can do some research on that as well. That's
Yeah, when you do
it's
let me know.
I will.
Something.
Yeah, I mean that's why I do this podcast. My whole goal with this is to entertain, inform, and just have some fun doing it. I want to learn something, but I want to have fun while doing so. So being an agent of athletes at the highest level, what are some of the really cool experiences that you've gotten to do? I mean, I'm sure you're there for big games, for draft nights, for celebrations. What are some of the really cool things that you get to do on a regular basis?
I would say the coolest thing is going to a player's first NHL game. That is it's the culmination of years and years and years of work by the player and his family and everyone around him to get him to this point. And you never know if there's going to be a second game, but once you play in the league, you're in that book forever. So that to me is the number one most exciting thing. The draft's always exciting, but it's nerve-wracking at the same time. Player's first game, that's pure fun.
And just when you see them go out there for the rookie lap, I mean, I've been a fan for a long time. I've been to hundreds of NHL games. I had season tickets in Dallas. Anytime I see the rookie lap at the top level, I still tear up a little bit, thinking about the road it took them to get to this and how it must feel for them right now. And as an agent, is it a similar thing? Are you tearing up a little bit when you see them go out there?
No doubt about it. I mean, it's special. We're helping our guys get through every level of hockey and then to finally achieve the goal. And the goal is not just to play one game. The goal obviously is to be an impact player at the NHL level, but it has to start with one game. And it's great. I mean, it's great. Those are just fun nights.
And it's got me thinking about a lot of the, I'm sure that there's so many amazing moments that you've gotten to experience as an agent. And I'm looking at the client list of professional alumni on the Edge Sports Management website, edgesportsmanagement.com. If anyone else wants to check this out, lots of big names, lots of names of guys that. You see them like, oh, I remember this guy. Oh, look at there's this guy. It's a cool thing, and I just thinking about this. you talk about, the special moment of a player making his debut, a player, achieving something. You've gotten to live that out quite a bit with a lot of these guys, I'm sure. So,
Quite a bit. We go full circle too. I mean, one of the most emotional moments I had was about a month ago, um, watching Jonathan Quick play his last game. I know we talked before we went on the air. So, Jonathan, I first met him when he was a junior, I believe it was, at Avon Old Farms, which is a prep school in New England.
oh yeah,
Not many people, nobody knew who he was at the time. I mean, this was before the internet and everything. It's a long time
right.
ago. But I happened to go to a game, watched him. I didn't go to the game to watch him, but he was phenomenal. Asked around about him. He wasn't a big name player at the time. I went back the next week to watch him again. He was great again. A bit undersized, very unorthodox, but incredibly athletic and competitive. And I said to myself, hey, I'm going to go back and watch him play next week. I believe they're playing one of the top teams at that point. I said, if he plays well, I don't care that no one really knows him that well. I'm going to call him. Sure enough, I think he stopped like 42 or 43, some crazy number like that. And I called him, met him at his house in Hamden, Connecticut with his parents. And his dad, who's an unbelievable guy, looked at me and said, what are you doing here? I mean, he was like in shock. I said, I don't know, but I think your kid has a chance to play. And fast forward 19 years in the NHL, driving down to the Garden to watch his last home game, I literally was crying. Just thinking about everything we went through, and it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, the career he had, and really the person he became. You get to see these kids from a high schooler through college, through the minors, ups and downs, everything, getting married, having their own kids, buying houses, winning Stanley Cups, all the way through to retirement. It is special. I mean, it can be emotional.
Looking at Jonathan's Elite Prospects page, he had 33 games in the AHL. Did you ever have occasion to make it here to Manchester
I've been
for any of those games?
Many times.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
he actually had some games in the East Coast League, too, because he missed a meeting or two in Manchester, but he turned it all around.
So, any thoughts on Vegas, Manchganistan, as they call it?
I thought it was a great arena, nice little city. I represented a few guys that have gone through there in the years. Kevin Westgarth was another guy that who lived with Quickie back then. Randy Robitaille played there at some point. Randy's a partner of mine now. Randy works in Ottawa for us.
Oh, man.
So I've spent a lot of time in Manchester.
Well, be sure and tell Randy that Ken Kale says hello, because I'm working with him every day at the radio station here. So, no, it's I like it. I live outside of town a bit, but I'm there all the time for baseball and for other stuff. I think it's a very interesting dynamic there. I was having a discussion during a sales meeting today about how New Hampshire, you're an hour from Boston, you're 4 hours from New York, you're smack dab right there by the population center of the country. But still, even in Manchester, it's probably 45 minutes from Boston, feels very isolated from the outside world. And I think that could be a positive and a negative at times. Representing players, you're going to have players that go all over the country to, places like Cedar Park, Texas, or Tucson, Arizona.
Texas is nice. I would take Cedar Park, Texas over Manchester. I hope the people.
I would too.
Don't get upset by that.
The barbecue's better for sure. I used to go down to plenty of Texas Stars games, so I'm a big fan of northern Travis County. Being a Dallas, resident, it's just, former Dallas resident, it's right there. What are, the AHL has kind of experienced kind of an interesting movement where for the longest time it was kind of just on the East Coast, and it's moved west. You have teams that are in Arizona, Nevada, California. You've had some teams that move around. You had the Iowa Chops and the Exarban Knights, teams that were only around for a year and then kind of just go somewhere else. When an AHL team moves like that and you're representing a player on that team, what goes into like your side of things when say an AHL team like the Bridgeport
Yeah,
Islanders moving to Hamilton, Ontario?
that's
Have
what
you seen the
I was
the new
about to bring
name?
that up. The
Yeah,
Hammers, I think I read.
that's so low effort. So low
Yeah.
effort.
Well,
They're,
we have a couple of kids that played in Bridgeport, and it's a big move. So
yeah,
these kids are American kids. Now all of a sudden you're going to be in a different country, and it does come into play when they think about their future with the
right.
organization.
And the affiliation changes. I mean, the new Trenton ECHL team, the Ironhawks, is now the Islanders affiliate instead of Worcester. And Worcester has been the Islanders affiliate for a few years. When things move around like that, and obviously there aren't a whole lot of players at the ECHL level who are, you know, beholden to an NHL team. Those ECHL teams tend to sign their own players, but still, I'd imagine there's a handful of guys that end up having to move. Is that one of those things where it's kind of like, okay, look, this is it a similar process for like when an NHL player signs with a different team?
It's similar, except for when an NHL player signs with a different team, he's done it by his own choice. Um, in this case, they don't have a choice, so it's never as good when someone's telling you what you're going to do. But you touched upon the expansion of the AHL out west. That's all part of growing the game, like you talked about earlier. I think it's fantastic. When teams change their affiliations, that's more the business side of it. I think the fans themselves, they just want to go to the rink and enjoy themselves. I'm going to be going to a game tomorrow night in Springfield. So they're called the Thunderbirds now.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I grew up outside of Springfield, going to Springfield Indians games, Springfield Kings games back then. Now they're with St. Louis. I go to those games now, they're still packed with the same people looking to have fun like they were when I was a kid. I don't think they care too much about who the affiliate is. They just want, they know Springfield is their hometown team.
Oh, the Springfield Thunderbird. I remember before. I think it's a different franchise now, but they were the Blue Jackets double A team at one point, or a triple A team, AHL. Why am I thinking baseball? Sorry. Yeah, they were the Blue Jackets AHL team for a while. Then of course they moved, and now they're with the Blues. It's an amazing thing. The level of the world of minor league sports, the how the levels go. I've seen teams go places, teams swap affiliates. I mean, the Allen Americans are always seems like they've always got a new affiliate every year. Do players tend to look for stability when they're say they're an AHL free agent? Are they looking for stability with affiliations, or is it one of those things where that's just kind of not as
Yeah,
big a factor?
I would say if you're an AHL free agent, the number one factor is opportunity to play at the NHL level. Um, these guys, they don't care where they're playing. They just want the best shot to play. If you're older and you're playing on an AHL contract, and say you're one of those guys that's a captain and a leader, and you have a family, that's a different story. Then you're going to be looking for some stability, and maybe your wife works or your kids are in school, and you don't want to be jumping around. But younger guys, the number one priority is finding an organization that'll give them a chance.
So yeah, I'm looking at the AHL's website. Do you think the Thunderbirds have what it takes to get the Calder Cup this year?
I think they've been better than people expected. Um, we have three guys on that team, I believe it is, and it's a good group from what I understand. I've seen them play a couple times. The building is pretty lively. They got good goaltending a couple times I was there. They're pretty deep, so I think they've got a chance. I don't think they're the favorite by any means, but I know they'll work hard.
Well, they came in as a 6 seed at 32, 32, 6-2, and they beat a 54-win Providence team.
Yeah, if you look at, and I don't know this for certain, but I think they got off to a very bad start, and the second half of the season they actually played pretty well. So
Hey,
they're
that matters.
Yeah,
Just trying to make up ground.
I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if you've been to a game in Springfield, but they've got all kinds of parking situations now where they're redoing the parking facility outside of the arena. So you actually have to park over at the casino. There's a MGM Grand Casino in
Oh
Springfield.
yeah.
So you park in that huge parking lot where the casino is, and then you have to walk through the casino. Yeah, I'm sure they entice you to put some money down before you get to the game.
Oh, I'm sure. No, I haven't been to an AHL game in Springfield. It's been on my to-do list ever since I got up here. But it's one of those things. You get up somewhere, you hit the ground running, and the next thing you know, you've got a dozen jobs that you've got to take care of on a regular basis. But I have told myself that if they do end up making it to the Calder Cup Finals, I will go. I will go to a game. I will. I mean, it's one of those things. Any sport, the championship level it's unreal. Like growing up in Dallas, you have the Texas high school football state championships at Cowboy Stadium. And one year I made the choice to go to the 6-man football championship there. And these, 6-man football, it's for towns of 200 people that, this high schools can't field a full team. They probably got 30 kids at the high school. And, you're in a 100,000 seat stadium that's going to be hosting an NHL outdoor game very soon, by the way. And you have pretty much the entire 200-person town has gone there to support the team. And those 200 people, 400 people combined between the two towns, they make that place loud, supporting their boys. And it's at any level of sports, of competition, the championship is always so much fun to be around. And I was lucky enough, I got to go to all the Texas Stars home games in the 2018 Calder Cup, which that was an incredible series. And it's one of those things that if I could experience that again, I definitely would like to. And I imagine Springfield, after the start they had, like you said, if they manage to go all the way to the Calder Cup, it's going to be a rocking barn.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It will be rocking.
And that's that's got to be, as a fan, you go to a game, you obviously want your team to win, but as an agent, when you have a vested interest in, hey, I hope my guy does well here because that means it's going to create more opportunities for him. Hopefully, when you go to a say like a game 7 of a playoff series, that's got to be absolutely nerve-wracking. Are you chewing your fingernails? Are you sitting up there nervous, or is it one of those things where you've done it for so long that it's there's always going to be nerves, but you just know how to handle it better?
There are nerves. It depends if you have players on both teams. It depends if you have a goaltender. The biggest nerves are if you represent a goalie. I don't know how goalies' parents do it their whole lives. You sit down and you are just praying for the next 60 minutes just to go by as fast as possible. And really, that's what it is. You're wishing that time to go away. And everyone's nerve-wracking. If you're a forward, that's fun, right? If you're representing a forward, hey,
right.
If he scores, great. If he doesn't, you know what? That's fine. Defensemen, a little more pressure, but goalies are tough. We've had situations even in Stanley Cup, finals. We've got players playing against each other, and it's difficult. And these players, a couple of cases I can think of, we're close friends because we do agency things in the summer and blah blah blah, and they got pissed off. They didn't even want me going to a game because they knew I was going to talk to the other guy. So in situations like that, you kind of stay away. And even in the playoffs in general, you don't talk to the guys quite as much. Obviously, every player is different. But
right.
A lot of guys are just laser focused, and they don't want any outside distractions at all.
God, it's such an incredible thing, the mental aspect of it. And it's something that I really enjoy watching. It's working around it, seeing the players get ready. And I mean, for me as a PA guy, I'm one of the loud, energetic PA guys. The newer generation is kind of how I do things. So I have my own process of how I work to get ready. But it's kind of fun to compare and contrast that with the players. And is that something that has kind of changed with, players recently? Are they obviously you hear the stories of guys, in between periods, smoking darts and chugging Miller Lights and stuff. I don't think guys like Nathan McKinnon would allow that these days. I heard, you hear about these players who are fanatical about taking the best care of their bodies. How about taking care of the mental aspect? Is that something that the preparation and the maintenance, the doing whatever it takes to make sure that mentally you're as sharp as you are physically, is that something that's changed a lot in the past, couple decades?
Everything you just mentioned has changed greatly. First, taking care of your physical body has changed greatly. I came in past the time of them smoking darts in the locker room, but not too far past. But even then, guys would drink, guys would, go out and have fun, 2 nights before a game, night before a game. Stuff doesn't really happen anymore. The younger generation, to their credit, they've honed in their bodies, their training, and we've got guys that won't put anything in their mouth that is not approved by their their guru, their dietitian, and you see it. I mean, these kids come in earlier and they're ready to play. The veterans are a little frustrated with it because they want guys to go out with it at night,
Right.
And these kids aren't going out. But it's made the game on the ice better because these kids they're just better than they've ever been.
And it's really fun to see it on a daily basis. You see the guys come in early to get their stretching, and you see guys doing yoga. And one of the coaches I work with is an old school coach, former police officer. I don't think the man's ever done yoga once in his life. But, he encourages it because he knows it makes it helps achieve that edge. I have suggested to him, and it got shot down, and no room left for interpretation. He wasn't interested in doing yoga. I tried to suggest, hey, we got a big 3-game series against this, first place team. Would you be willing to, if we get the sweep, are you willing to do yoga? He wasn't about it, but is that one of those things where, the generational differences are just how much are guys who have, come from an older generation, they've got to learn to accept the new way of doing things. How much of a culture difference is there, and how much leeway, how much latitude is being given to the guys, the younger guys to do what they feel is best for their, I guess, their bodies, their careers, their minds.
Yeah, at this point, I would say that the younger guys have carte blanche.
Okay.
5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it was more of a transition time where the older guys were struggling with the new technology. I don't know if you have kids that listen to this podcast, but I had a veteran player, great player, who told me one day how upset he was because he had to go out to bars all the time to socialize and do what he wanted to do, whereas these kids now just get online and they swipe right, they swipe left, whatever they do, and they don't have to put in hard work. So I mean, those kind of things, it's a difference in the generations, but we're past that part of it now. I think the veterans are more frustrated in that the young guys, they stay to themselves a little more, so they get to a hotel room and they lock it down. Whereas the veterans like to go out and have a nice dinner and have a couple beers and enjoy life. At the same time, you talk about mental health. I have a player that told me he actually believes that some of these young guys, they are so geared up on everything they do having to be the exact right way that affects them a bit negatively, whereas in the old days, a veteran would grab a rookie and say, hey, come on, kid, we're going to go have some drinks this afternoon, and that would help ease the pressure that the player is under.
It's funny you mention that. Obviously, I don't play sports at a pro level. I try to handle my job as professional as I can from a sound aspect, making sure the levels are right. I'll rope some of the healthy scratches into walking around the rink while I repeat the same thing on the mic to see how I sound at different spots, because I'm a perfectionist, and I want to make sure that I'm giving my absolute best performance, and that everything is going well from my side of it. And I will, it's one of those things where I get so caught up in, can this one guy over in the beer terrace, can he hear what I'm saying? That starts to like affect how I'm doing my work. And you get so caught up in, when you're a perfectionist, when you think about how much that you just want everything to go right, it really, really just starts to get in your kitchen a little bit. When things do start going a little sideways, when maybe you flub a word, maybe maybe the audio levels are a little too high in this one spot. I mean, is it one of those things like, is this similar for a lot of the players where it's like, okay, nothing is ever going to be 100% perfect. Obviously, the drive for mastery, the drive for perfection is part of being a competitor. How do you balance that drive with the reality that you're going to miss a shot, you're going to, flub a save? Where does the mental balance come from in that aspect?
Yeah, it's difficult because obviously to get to where these players are, they've had to be as close to perfect as possible. Um, they're not used to failing, and if they do, it can affect them negatively. Now, there are people they can talk to, which are very helpful. The Players Association has certain services which are very helpful. Um, Love to see the guy just take some days off as part of the new CBA. Their mandated days off, which is great. Get guys away from the rink, get them to go play golf, get them to go hang out with their families for the day, whatever it is, just to clear their mind a bit. Because again, we touched upon it earlier. They're kids. A lot of them are kids. You got guys coming in the league at 18, 19, 20 years old. Um, when I was 18, 19, or 20 years old, I wasn't thinking about, man, I hope I don't, miss a save in front of 20,000 people and 10 million people watching on TV. So you need to have an outlet, and you need to make sure that these guys have the resources they need to be mentally healthy at all times.
It is, I think that we were talking a little bit about what I call the era of player empowerment. And I think that's one of the things about it that I think is a positive aspect. Players aren't just tools in a toolbox for teams anymore. These are individuals who have lives outside of the game. And you see like the player assistance program being able to help guys who are struggling, where, before you hear obviously the horror stories of guys who, have dealt with just horrific stuff as a result of, head injuries, concussions, substance abuse stuff. It's tragic. And just, I think that we are in a better place now with the resources that the Players Association has provided. And is it one of those things like when you're a top level competitor that it's hard to admit that you need to ask, help from somebody else? When you're the man, how do you not be the,
Yeah.
to quote, like, how do you admit, like, instead of being the man, like, oh, I think, in my opinion, I think it is being the man to admit that you can't always carry it on your shoulders. I think that's a level of strength to ask for help from somebody, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's no doubt that's being more accepted.
Right.
It used to be you had to be the man. If you were hurting inside, you just had to hide it. It's not
Right.
that way anymore. There's been plenty of campaigns, not just to professional athletes, but to society in general, to make sure it's okay. If you need help, it's okay to ask. And I do think the NHL has done a really good job of that. You're seeing some players take advantage of the resources where in the past they might not have, and who knows where that would have ended up. But I do know these players are really well taken care of.
So I want to give a shout out to an organization that the New Hampshire Mountain Kings, my North American League team has partnered with Connor's Climb, named after a young man who died from suicide, and his family is doing a campaign to raise awareness to the program. They call it is Stick It to Stigma, and they come to our team and talk about basically everything we just mentioned. All the players wear the Stick It to Stigma shirts over a weekend. We share resources. It's an amazing thing. I've heard from people about this has been something that is, it's saved lives and it's turned people's lives around. And I think it's like making it more accessible, making it more acceptable to admit that you're not okay. That I've always, the way I've heard it described is when you break your leg, you go to the hospital and get a cast. When you cut your arm, you go get stitches. When something's, not, when you've got a chemical imbalance in your brain, it ought to be looked at as just the same thing. There's something that I need to get help for. And we are better about that as a society. I think we still have ways to go, but I don't want to discount credit where credit is due. And I want to give a shout out to Connor's Climb and Stick It to Stigma. Great program. Is there anything, anything particular, any campaigns that are like that you're, you've been a part of or, have been brought to your attention?
There's something called the Shoulder Check here. I'm based in north of Manhattan, southern Connecticut area, and they do a game every summer for a young boy who had a similar issue, and a lot of the NHL players from the area and a lot of NHL players come in and they raise a lot of money, and more so it's about the awareness. It gets out to the young kids that, hey, just check on your friend. That's the whole idea, is, using the term check in different ways. So check on everybody to make sure they're okay. And it's a tremendous organization. I think it's been going 3 or 4 years now, and Jonathan Quick plays in, and Marty St. Louis, all those guys are around. It's great.
So I just pulled it up. Shouldercheck.org, July 30th at Sacred Heart University.
Yeah, they're doing it at Sacred Heart this year for the first time, from what I understand. The arena at Sacred Heart is spectacular.
That is awesome. I want to find a way to get involved with that. And it says get involved here. There's things to do. Maybe we can talk after the recording about if you know anyone there that I'd like to maybe help do PA or some media stuff there if possible. I believe in this. I've had my own bouts with depression. I have family members who have as well. I think being willing to admit that and talk about it openly is part of getting rid, making sure the stigma gets done away with. Obviously, it's something that is going to take time, but I believe in doing what I can to help, promote the message. And like I said, if it's one of those things that it will take time, but it's efforts to try and do better, I think that it goes a long way.
I fully agree. Yep.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I've got a couple things here from some friends. I texted some friends that we were going to be doing this, and I've got a couple of questions.
All right, bring them on.
One from my buddy Aiden, who, for his birthday in 2023, I got him a Golden Knights Jonathan Quick jersey. I also got him, I had this custom made, a Jonathan Quick Columbus jersey.
Ooh, yeah.
For the, the couple hours he was with the Blue Jackets, kind of a name only. Are there ever moments where a guy gets traded, then he gets traded right away? When a guy gets traded to a team and then gets traded right away, is there something like you've reached out or he's reached out to a team or player services where it's like, okay, well, wait, false start, you're going somewhere else now? It's like, oh, well.
Yeah, there are. I mean, the quick situation was not like that.
Yeah.
Basically, he got traded to Columbus. Columbus was a struggling team at that time.
Right.
Didn't have a chance to make the playoffs. Quickie was, more at the point of his career where he wanted to be somewhere where he had a chance to win and could help that way. And to be honest, Jarmo Kekalainen, who was the GM of Columbus at the time, was tremendous.
Oh yeah.
I spoke to Jarmo that night. Said they had no disrespect to Columbus whatsoever, but Jonathan's at the point of his life and his career where I don't think it's a great fit for him. And Jarmo, without batting an eyelash, said, "Hey, I get it. I've got the utmost respect for Quickie. We'd love to have him here. We think he'd be great for our kids and great for our community. But if you're telling me you want us to move him, I fully understand and respect it, and we look to get it done." So when they traded for him, they weren't thinking to flip him. So they may have had some quick jerseys made up already. I don't know, but it worked out. It worked out well, and that's one time where it's an example of the general manager, really respecting and doing the right thing by a player. And Jarmo now is obviously back in the game, which is awesome. And anything I could ever do for him, I certainly would at some point.
And I've heard that some GMs have reputations of being guys who they take the human aspect more into consideration than others. I've always heard that Jim Nill in Dallas is one of those guys.
Yeah, Jim's a really good guy. Very good guy. Obviously a smart hockey man as well. Yeah, but again, most guys are good guys.
Right? Yeah.
Put in a position at times where it's business, and
right.
You're going to have disagreements or discussions, and a lot of it's based on who has what leverage at the time.
Right.
But I do think deep down, most general managers do care for their guys as human beings.
Yeah, definitely, and certainly, I think the mustache that Jim has is incredible as well. I'm trying my own. It's not there yet, but hopefully, give me a few years and maybe I'm there. I'm surprised that the offer of having Donato's Pizza all the time in Columbus wasn't enough to get Jonathan to stay.
Yeah, I don't know if he's ever had the pizza there. I can tell you, I spent a week in Columbus because of the draft there one summer, and it was a great time. The area around the rink is awesome. The restaurants, the bars are awesome. I represented Cam Atkinson, who spent a lot of his career there.
Yes, he did.
He moved back there now with his family. He liked it that much. That's where he's raising his kids.
My dad's side of the family is from Columbus. Most of them have moved up to Westerville, but just ever since 1909, when Giovanni Posani immigrated here from Italy, I mean, now at this point, there are more Posanis in the Columbus area than anywhere else in the world. And, I mean, I have like 100 cousins there. So I've spent a lot of time there as a kid. And, it's funny, when I was younger, I used to like to take pot shots at Columbus. It's one of those Midwestern cities where it's kind of cloudy all the time. And, it's just kind of like, it's that scene. But having spent a lot of time there as an adult, and I think, honestly, Columbus, the last decade or so, has experienced a renaissance. And it's a much different place now than 10, 15 years ago when I started going there. And I think it's going to continue moving in the right direction. Are there any other cities like that maybe 10, 15 years ago weren't the best places, but have kind of experienced, kind of a come up a little bit?
Well, I don't know if you can say Nashville 10, 15 years ago wasn't a great place, but there's no better place than Nashville.
Oh, man.
As a fan, as a player, as an agent to go there, I mean, that's a place where there was a draft there, too. It was awesome for the week. But you go there and you step outside of that rink and you're on Broadway and just in the middle of everything. But the other part of Nashville, too, is you can get away from downtown. That's all the tourists really see. They're beautiful areas.
Definitely.
Great. And they love hockey. It's a great place to be.
So we're talking a little bit about the draft. I have a question here from a buddy. But before I give the question, were you at the 2018 draft in Dallas?
Yes.
What did you think about that? I went there. I was a season ticket holder. I was at both days from start to finish. Day two was really interesting. The team I worked for at the time, the Lone Star Brahmas, they had their goalie Mitchell Gibson picked by the Caps in the fourth round. Great moment for Gibby. He's still with the Caps in their minor league system. He's about the same age I am at 28, and whenever I go, I try to go to one Bruins and Caps preseason game in Boston every year, and usually for one of those preseason games, they'll dress him, and it's seeing a guy that I worked pretty closely with at the start of my career wearing an NHL uniform is just a really cool moment. What did you think about the NHL draft in Dallas?
They all blend in. I don't really remember that one standing out. I remember I did eat fried alligator on the roof of a bar/restaurant. That much I remember. The draft is
Was it Gators?
Gators. I think it was. As a matter of
Yes!
fact. That's impressive.
So I have a fun Gators story. I used to take the dart train to every Stars game. When I was in high school, I would get home. I mean, when I was in high school, it was just the start of the Ben and Sagan era. So the Stars, hottest ticket in town in the 1990s, 2000s and 2010s, they kind of played second fiddle to the Mavericks, the Rangers, the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are always a big deal there. I would be able to get a ticket for $5, and you get $5 a ticket in the upper level of the American Airlines Center, a refillable popcorn, and a refillable drink. So, for a high school kid, I was going to like 20, 30 games a year. I mean, I was going to almost more games there than when I had season tickets, when I had my own career.
Yeah,
so
good luck getting that deal now.
No, it's one of those things you didn't really appreciate. I loved it at the time. It was a lot of fun. I'd take all my friends, but I would get off at West End Station. I would walk by Gators, and I used to go in there and get burgers. I remember once I got the alligator steak. And Gators is unfortunately closed in the West End, which, knowing I will never have one of those burgers on the sourdough bun makes me want to cry. But it was such a unique, it's a Cajun bar in a pretty rough part of downtown Dallas. But yeah, that's certainly was a moment in time. Did you try the riding bull outside the arena?
I did not know.
I did, and I got bucked off. My grandpa took a video of me, and I just got thrown right off first spin. It was a really fun event for me as a fan, just seeing all the. I think it was the first league event I went to. I went to the Winter Classic 2 years later, but seeing all the trophies, seeing the commissioner there, and seeing all the big name execs, and seeing the floor and the stage, it was really cool as a fan. And I'm really happy that I didn't like the decentralized draft. I don't think anyone really did. I didn't really like the whole theater setup. I'm glad that the NHL is going back to host cities. And is that something that something that everyone's happy about, or what are your thoughts on it?
It's still a decentralized draft.
Buffalo's
hosting this year. The teams aren't going to be there. The scouts aren't going to be there. So, from my perspective, you would go to the draft obviously to support your draft potential draft picks. But a lot of business got done during that week because all the general managers are in town. It's right before free agencies, players are getting qualifying offers. So there was a lot to be done at those drafts. Now, since there's no team personnel there, you go to support your players that are going to potentially be drafted, but there's not a lot else going on for us. So, I preferred having everybody in one place. I like the idea it's going from city to city now. I'm sure Buffalo will be awesome. But from a business standpoint, I liked it better when the teams were there.
I am actually thinking about going. I might actually have a baseball game that day, but whenever they have the draft, it's always like it's a fun event. It's fun to be at, and it's fun to see all the fans from the different teams. I remember that was the first time.
It's because you're not sitting with players who are sweating, waiting to get picked every pick and every pick. So some of those days are long days in my career.
Oh yeah, it's. that is something I have thought about. The guys who think they're going to be an early pick and then they end up going late.
Yeah,
I mean, how is that one of those things?
Even if you know you're going to be a late pick, you're still sitting there sweating every pick, thinking it's going to be you. It could be the second round. You know you're going in the sixth round, but you're still sweating.
How much, like, is there a lot of, hey, take it easy, take it like deep breaths? Is there a lot of that, or is it just kind of like sit there and let the moment happen?
It's a little of both. Depends on the player. You're just waiting. I've had players taken in the first round, and you really never know. I know people tend to think, oh, everyone knows who's going to get drafted where. You don't, unless you're the first pick.
Right.
You don't really know. I've been doing this for a long time. As we talked about, I can think of one instance where a team told me beforehand that they were going to pick a certain player at a certain spot, and they actually did it. I've had times where teams have told me they're going to pick a player, and they ended up picking the player. So nobody knows. So these players are sitting there, and they're sweating it out.
It's incredible. So the question I have about the draft is, do you prefer that the draft be in, a city like Philly or Boston or one of the other cities that doesn't get as much, attention? A place like, Phoenix wasn't getting a whole lot of league events out in Glendale, which RIP the Coyotes. I spent a lot of time in Arizona, and I spent a lot of time going to Coyotes games. Arizona, I'm just hoping for the swift return to the Coyotes from a personal standpoint. But are you hoping, like, when you're going to a league event like that it's going to be in a classic hockey city or maybe one of the newer, southern markets?
All the markets are good now. All the cities are good. That's what we tell the guys. When they're looking to do their no trade list or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
There's really not a bad city. I know Winnipeg gets a bad rap, Edmonton gets a bad rap, but the guys that are there, they like it. So, yeah, it's nice to spread the wealth, so to speak, and have the events go to different cities. But I've enjoyed every city I've been to.
That is awesome. I've been to quite a few NHLs. I think I've been to 18 NHL rinks over the years. Been some really incredible ones. I definitely
What's your favorite?
feel like.
Which is your favorite one?
Ooh, favorite NHL rink. I really love Little Caesars Arena. I was really impressed because you're walking around the concourse and it feels like. It's just such a massive venue, and it kind of feels like the way they designed that concourse, like it's a city street. Very beautiful. I love the lighting, the light panels on the ceiling, the video board. I was very, very impressed by that. Chicago was a lot of fun. Minnesota was really cool. I loved Minnesota. Probably if I had to pick like a top three, I always want to call it Staples Center, but Crypto.com Arena. I actually went to the first game where it was known as Crypto.com Arena. And I'm never going to get used to that name. That was a really fun scene. Madison Square Garden was really fun, but honestly, if I actually had to pick a favorite, I think it would probably be the Prudential Center.
Wow. All right.
I love Devils fans. So I have family in Princeton, and I used to go there and take the NJ Transit up to Newark as a high school kid, which certainly was.
Did you go to Hobie Baker rink a lot at Princeton?
That is on like my top 5 to-do list. I have to do it before I die. I had a chance to go to a Princeton game when I was 15 or so, but my vote got canceled out by the votes of everyone else in the family. So it's a place.
They have a former Lone Star Brahma playing goal for them.
They do, yes. It's Brahmas are known for their goaltending. They are
the
excellent.
Fund makes everybody block every shot.
I was texting with Fonger last week. They unfortunately didn't go all the way in the Robbie this year, but I have fond memories of working with Dan Wildfong. Of course, not during games. He's a very scary person to deal with during games.
He is a good
But
man, though. He is a good man. He is intense.
He he has been so good to me over the years. Even I haven't worked for the Brahmas since 2020, and we have stayed in touch. And he has just been a friend, someone that whenever I got to go to the North American League Top Prospects event this past year, or this past season. I was the PA guy for it, and it was a lot of fun. All the league events are a lot of fun because it's like a big family reunion when you've been around it long enough. And I've been in the Null or around the Null for 9 years now, and you get to see a lot of people that you've gotten to know. And I'm at the point now where former players who were there the first couple of years are now reffing. They're coaching. They have advanced. I mean, the coach of one of the NA3 teams I worked for, the Texas Brahmas, is coaching in the ECHL. It's a really cool thing. But yeah, shout out Arthur Smith.
Good call.
He was really fun to watch.
Nice. Yeah, he's a good goalie, no doubt.
So, Devils fans are fun. Like you said, Hobie Baker Rink, that is a place I've always wanted to go to. What did you think of Matthews Arena?
Matthews Arena. Well, been there a lot of times. Yeah, had a lot of character, dog pen and all that, so that's fun and exciting. But I think time had come. It's time had come. Let's put it that way.
Oh man, I was at the third to last game there. I was doing some stuff for the hockey radio show I do. We did a big. So the Mountain Kings do a radio show in Concord, and I'm one of the hosts for it. And we had a show during the holiday break where we're not going to be able to have players on because they're out of town. So I made a big push to. I got credentials to go to a Merrimack game, Dartmouth game, a Northeastern game, and interviewed former Null players and coaches to talk about like the alumni of the league at the higher levels of college hockey, and put together a really good show. I'm actually I don't like to brag a whole lot, but I feel like I over Thanksgiving break I'm trekking all over New Hampshire and Massachusetts to chase tape, and I put together a really good show. But I ended up going to the third to last Northeastern home game, and Matthews, absolutely ton of character, and it was such a fun place to see a game. I am sad that obviously its time had come. I wish that there had been some way to, for people I've talked to, it's one of those things where the work they would have had to do to keep it functional and able to be used, it's stuff they would have had to do 20, 30 years ago that they didn't do. And I'm interested to see the new rink when they get that done, and representing players, having players that you work with. Do you work with NCAA players as well?
We're advisors to NCAA
right.
players.
So a team like Northeastern, where they're going to be playing mostly, there was mostly road games for the second half of the year. I think they're at Walter Brown the next couple of years, right?
Yeah, they've jumped around a little bit, but I believe Walter Brown is going to be their predominant home site.
So as an advisor, does that kind of complicate matters for you, or does that not really change that much?
It doesn't change that much. Again, like we talked about, an AHL player looking to get an opportunity at the NHL level. You're talking about kids who are trying to find their way in college, and they just want a good program, one that's going to develop them with good coaches and the opportunity. I don't think they mind if they've got to jump on a bus and go to practice that way.
That's interesting. No, it really is a different scene. And here's a question that was just sent in: should NHL teams have bands like college teams?
Have bands?
Yeah, bands like the marching bands for whenever they score.
Well, the problem is they take up room in the arena, which are
That is a fair
ticket
point.
sales. Uh,
That is a fair point.
but it'll be fun. I know in Nashville they have bands play between periods, so that's kind of cool.
I went to a couple blues games over the years, and they would have like local jazz artists, and they had this lady, this soul singer there, and stuff like that. It's just about building a fun atmosphere. Like, I work in the production side of things. I started the Mountain Kings concert series, which we only had one this year, but it's trying new things, trying to build stuff. It's all about building a fun and an atmosphere that is you're trying to do something that's unique and new, and I think Nashville has really excelled at that.
Yeah, can one be considered a series? I don't think you
Well, it's a series when we get the next one. So,
can. Exactly.
oh man, well George, thank you so much. This has been so incredible, and I would love for this to maybe be a recurring thing. They talk about one being a series. Maybe this is the first of a series.
Could be, but we'll see.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking a chance on a young and up and coming podcast. I was telling my friends this, there's going to come a point where maybe when I have my 5 million subscribers and my own brand of lemonade vodka, that I'm going to remember the people who were a part of it at the beginning. So you're on that list now.
Thanks for having me. Obviously, you're putting the work in, so good luck. Good luck with everything.
Much appreciated.
Really appreciate being on.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. More stuff coming soon. So remember to like and subscribe at Alex Posani on YouTube and follow at 25 Degrees Pod on Instagram. So from all of us, Alex and George here, have a good night, and we will talk to you later.
Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.